Graveyard shift workers, what is the weirdest thing you have experienced in the dead of night? Bad formatting. I'm mobile. Acted in a haunted house in my senior year and was normally scheduled to be outside the house, but this night, I had to cover another actor and was put inside the house. For context, this house is some old fairgrounds in my city that were the site of a Japanese internment camp during WW2. Other actors always talk about seeing shadow people in the house, but I mostly assumed it was half exaggeration. Pretty much half an hour into my shift and it's a quiet night. So plenty of time for me to just sit on the floor of the room. There are motion detectors in the hall outside my room that light up when guests are approaching, so I can expect them. Normally the detector goes off and I'll have a few seconds to get ready. Guest comes in. They trip another motion detector, strobe lights. I do my scare, they run out. Easy stuff. The motion detector goes off, so I get into position and just wait. Nothing, no guest comes in and I'm like, weird, but don't really think about it and sit back on the floor. No phones allowed, so I'm literally staring into the dark space just outside my room. Motion detector goes off again. No guests. I'm keeping a good eye on the door, hole, dark space in front of the motion detector. Next time it lights up, I see a very distinct human shape. Just a shadow. There's no lights anywhere in the room that would put a shadow on the wall like that. I start to freak out a bit, but I try to keep cool. I'm talking to myself like, the shift has barely started. Keep it together, man. Eventually, my supervisor comes through, just following after a couple guests, and she does a little, "You okay?" as she leaves the room. I nod and tell myself I can hold it together until she comes through on her next check. I stay in my corner of the room, do a few more scares as guests come through, but the whole time I'm shaking a bit, heart pounding, sweating, generally the most anxious I have been in a few years, and that's saying something considering I used to regularly get panic attacks over nothing, but doing my best to hold it together. Motion detector continues to go off with seemingly nothing to trigger it, and I start seeing that shadow again, in both the entrance and exit of my room. Eventually, the breaker comes into my room to give me my 15. This is probably an hour and a half into my shift. I walk through to the break room and my supervisor is in there. She's like, "How are you doing?" Just checking up on me. It was my first night inside the house, so she's probably just checking in. As soon as she asks, I just lose it. I start crying and stutter out I'm very anxious for no reason. She gives me a few minutes to calm down and then asks if I think I can go back to the room. Just the thought of it has me freaking out, so she says she'll talk to the manager and see what she can do. I stay in the break room way longer than I should have, but I figure my supervisor didn't tell me to go back, so it's fine. Eventually, she moves me to another room in the house, and I finish the night perfectly fine. When I get home, I do a bit of research, and apparently a ghost hunting show did an episode on my house a few years earlier. They also reported shadows in that same room, and their equipment picked up growls and moans on recording. Make of that what you will, but I 100% believe something was in that hallway making me freak out. Super fun job though, 10/10 would recommend. A few years ago I started a call center job where we had 24/7 shifts. We were a brand new team. A colleague and I volunteered to do the first week of night shifts after our month-long training. A couple of nights in, it was just us and 3 or 4 other people in the entire office. No other companies worked that late. We were new, so we didn't know anyone else on the floor either. Sometime after midnight, she announced she was taking her 15 minutes break and went to the washroom, which was right outside the main doors to our office. Right after she left, a call came in which lasted until after her break was over. The moment I got off the call, she asked me if I had gone to the washroom looking for her. I said, "No, why?" Turns out while she was on the toilet, she had heard my voice calling out to her. She answered and even had a brief conversation with me right up to just before exiting the cubicle. She didn't think anything was amiss until she came back inside and found me on a call which had taken at least 10 minutes by that point. As we were seated in the last row of workstations by the door, I could also attest to the fact that no one else had left the office while she was gone. So if it wasn't me, then who or what had been speaking to her? Later on, we found out from some of our other colleagues that there were other people who have had other encounters as well, and it was reputed that the building and the area of the office was in used to be a forest and was pretty haunted. Used to work night shifts at a remote gas station. Entire night shift, I'd see maybe 15 to 30 people on a busy night. Where I sat behind the counter, I could see the well-lit forecourt, but the darkness around it was impossible to see through. It was like being on an island in an ocean of black. One night, about 2 a.m., I'm reading and waiting for someone to show up, and suddenly I feel like I'm being watched. It was like someone flipped a switch. Boom, eyes on me. I look outside, but nothing. No cars, no movement. I wonder if someone might be lurking just outside the light, but no. It really does feel like the presence is very close to the large glass windows. I try and ignore it, but in my mind's eye, I cannot shake the image of someone standing right against a door, staring in. I try to be logical about it. Not only is the door locked, customers have to be served at the hatch at this time, but because some people are incapable of reading signs, the incredibly heavy metal newspaper stand is pushed right up against the door, brakes locked. There's barely a few inches of space between it and the door. Even if, theoretically, someone invented invisibility and is using it to spy on the world's most boring night shift, there would be no room for a person to stand there. It's fine, I think. No need to worry. The door's locked anyway. But what if it isn't? The feeling of being watched is still there, and despite myself, I get up and go double-check the door is locked. Lo and behold, it is. I'm about to relax when I see the footprints. The big, wet footprints, just one single pair, angled with the toes pressing right against the door. Nobody crossed a well-lit forecourt, the newspaper stand had not moved. The night was completely dry. I was working one night at the hospital. There are 2 wards, level 1 and 2. I had barely slept the day before, so I was very exhausted. After finishing my rounds and ensuring every patient is asleep, I enter the nursing station that has a large glass window overlooking the driveway. I was about to sit down and resume my podcast when the light that illuminates the driveway casts a shadow of 3 men walking at a very fast pace towards the hospital. The men casting the shadows are blocked by the fence of a nearby house. Once the shadow comes to the connecting figures, it just stops, tantalizing close to being able to view the figures. The shadows do not move, as if they were brick walls in the shape of a human. I stare for minutes at these 3 shadows that I refuse to believe were not just moving. As I stare, I get this peripheral disturbance, as if someone had reached into their pocket right next to you, and it catches your attention. My eyes span towards to entry door, and I see the 3 figures' shadows cast by the lights from the hospital's reception. All distinctly moving and swaying, as if transitioning weight from one foot to the other. I immediately go to the intercom panel and engage the entryway camera. No one. I run back to the window. No one. I go back to the intercom and start the multi-display for cameras for the garage, entrance, garbage room, kitchen, elevators, and staff rear entrance. No one. I call down to the other nurses and warn them not to go to the garage, and them, being very superstitious, agree to not go down alone. After 1 hour of calming down, I go and do another round on the patients. The ward is shaped like an L, but with equal length hallways. One side was completely done and had no construction being done on it. The other side, however, had plenty of construction. Just after you turn the corner, the lights were completely blacked out along the hallway due to maintenance. And the only patient on this stretch of hallway was at the very end. Our hospital has 4 bays of 4 bedrooms down each hallway. All the lights are off for every room. I slowly walk the 40 meters stretch of hallway. After passing the first 2 bays, I notice the shadow cast into the hallway by moonlight of one figure, with his arms resting behind his back from the last and final bay. Assuming it was the patient standing up, I turn on the flashlight and enter the room. The patient was sleeping, but the shadow was still there. I stood shocked. I raised the torch to where the figure should be standing, nothing. As I slowly back out, the torch hits the window in which the moonlight is coming from. All I see is the face of a figure, no body, staring at me, following my eyes. It wasn't my reflection. The face was completely featureless. The eyes were too dark to distinctly tell the actual focus of the eyes. The nose was hardly recognizable, and the skin was sickly and pale white in color. And that was it. I remember walking back slowly to the nursing station, terrified I'd be stabbed or strangled, or a cold gust of air would hit my back. But nothing of the sort happened. It has never happened since. Now I was on almost 50+ hours of no sleep. So it is likely I was having visual hallucinations. Anyway, that's the creepiest real event or realistic dream I must have had on night shift. I still haven't concluded if I passed out from tiredness and dreamt the scenario. I talked to the nurses and they said someone from upstairs had called but hung up without saying anything. So could I have sleepwalked during the dream and mimed the scenario I was picking up the phone without actually talking? I don't know, but I still work night shifts and I ensure I get at least 6 hours of sleep beforehand. Nothing has happened since. Work night shift as a security guard at an apartment complex. One of the parking lots borders a fence to a school's track and field. Walking along it is normal when I shine the flashlight near some bushes in the far corner of the property. See a lawn chair with clothing positioned on it like someone was sitting there. Weird, but I don't think too much of it since it was probably some pervert or screwball lurking there during the day. Make note of it to remind the day shift guy to check the area. Couple hours later, come back to the area and sweep the flashlight along the bush line. Chair is still there, but it has been turned 90 degrees to the left, facing where I was walking, with the clothes gone and a hat placed in the seat instead. Okay, a bit creepy but nothing too weird. Finish the shift with nothing else weird happening and go home after telling the morning guy the situation. Come back the next night and speak to the evening shift guard who tells me that they checked the area after I left and didn't find any chair or clothing in the bush. Probably just someone trying to screw with me, but when you work alone at night, it does make you a bit paranoid.